The morning Mr. Hale told me to train, my assistant, hit like a slam in my chest. He said it with that flat voice, like he was handing me a file. "Dorcas, you'll train Nora," he announced in front of the whole team. I felt the floor tilt. I had built this job from the ground up, stayed late, fixed mistakes no one noticed, and my paycheck barely showed gratitude. Nora walked in smiling like a new plant being watered. Mr. Hale patted my shoulder as if I were a placid helper. "She'll take over soon. Give her a full week of orientation." My throat closed. Everyone pretending to be polite watched me fold my training notes open. I could taste copper, and the hurt was sharp and loud. It wasn't just the job, it was the erasure of years of careful work. I swallowed, said, "Of course," and the word sounded small. Inside I was boiling, but my face stayed calm because losing my temper would make me look weak. Nora's eyes were bright, unsure. Mr. Hale left with a satisfied nod. The whole office felt smaller, like the walls pressed closer. I had to decide, in that thin moment, how I would respond. Would I plead? Would I storm out? Or would I bend like a reed and plan my stubbornness? I started the training day with a smile that felt borrowed. Nora's smile was nervous and genuine. She asked basic questions about software, procedures, and where the good snacks were kept. I walked her through the calendar system I'd perfected, the small hacks to keep clients calm, and the files that only made sense to someone who had done the job for years. Each tip I gave was a small sting. My hands showed her how to archive in a way that saved hours. I showed her how to phrase emails so clients felt heard. She nodded, absorbing everything like a sponge. Mr. Hale hovered, approving. He loved efficiency. He loved the idea of someone newer and cheaper doing more. Between steps, Nora confessed she felt out of place, and a pang of protectiveness flickered through me. I remembered my early days, how I fumbled and learned. For a second I almost softened, thinking maybe she didn't know she was a replacement. Then a thread of cold clarity ran through me. Mr. Hale had decided. That night I stayed late and rewrote my training notes into a precise manual. I would teach her, but I would teach her wrong. Not cruelly. Strategically. I began subtle changes the next day. In meetings, I emphasized half the protocol and skipped the parts that took finesse. When Nora asked about the tricky clients, I told her a simplified version of how we handled them, enough to function, not enough to excel. She took notes obediently. I showed her how to use a template I'd made, but I taught her to rely on it in every situation. Templates save time, I said. Trust them. I omitted the little personal touches that made clients call me back with trust. In the break room, I placed sticky notes with wrong reminders in the shared binder where she always looked. It felt petty putting a smiley face on deception, but it was controlled and clean. I also began to test her with microtasks. I assigned her a follow-up email to a sensitive client and asked her to use the template. She did it perfectly, technically, but it lacked warmth, and the client responded curtly. I felt a small flicker of satisfaction. Nora looked confused, and I offered a sympathetic smile. Mr. Hale observed trends and would praise gains. This plan had to be slow and believable. If I moved too fast, he would notice sabotage. So I moved like water, soft, patient, relentless. Week 2 brought the first twist. Mr. Hale announced a client showcase meeting where the assistant would present a process improvement. I learned this news as if someone had dropped a rock in my chest. Nora would present. If she succeeded, my replacement would look capable. If she failed, my sabotage might be blamed on me for training poorly. The stakes were suddenly higher. I coached Nora on the surface facts I'd given her, and she practiced with a nervous grace. I fed her an idea for the presentation that leaned heavily on the template strategy. Keep it simple, I advised. When we rehearsed, she stumbled over the part where I had omitted the relationship-building step. I showed her a shortcut I had taught her, and she used it. The day of the showcase, the room was full. Clients, team leaders, even Mr. Hale's old mentor. Nora started well. The slides were clean. Halfway through, a veteran client asked about handling a sudden public complaint. Nora froze. She answered with the template advice and avoided the personal follow-up I'd always insisted on. The client frowned. I watched Mr. Hale's face change, an almost invisible tightening at the jaw. Nora's presentation ended with polite applause, but something fragile had cracked. I felt both triumph and an uneasy tremor. The ripples were starting to spread. After the presentation, whispers followed like a shadow. The email thread with the client grew colder. Mr. Hale called a private meeting with me that afternoon. I walked in expecting blame. Instead, he complimented my efficiency training. "Dorcas, you did well teaching a junior. We need consistency across the team." His words were smooth, but my chest was a stone. He mentioned cost-cutting, implied promotion shifts, and nodded as if the future was already a map with my name in a smaller font. I kept my expression neutral. When I left his office, Nora stood by the elevator, eyes glassy. She thanked me for being patient. I wanted to tell her the truth, that she had been set up to take my place, but instead I hugged her and felt a cracked sympathy. At lunch, I discovered an email Mr. Hale hadn't meant for me, a hiring contract draft with Nora's name and a start date after my supposed transition week. The document had numbers that made my salary look like a generous tip. A cold clarity took root. This was not just job loss. This was erased with a neat signature. The thought of packing up everything I had built and watching someone else carry it away made my hands tremble. I knew I had to keep going, harder and smarter. I escalated the plan. Small inconveniences had worked. Now I needed a pattern that would make Nora look competent enough to keep, but gradually reveal that she couldn't handle the invisible responsibilities. I started scheduling meetings with clients that required personal follow-up, things that were never on the templates, a birthday note, remembering a child's soccer game, a call after a bad delivery to say, "I'm on it." I documented everything in a shared log and then misfiled the cross-references so they wouldn't pop up in Nora's quick searches. When she missed a birthday, the client mentioned it with disappointment. When she forgot an after-call check-in, a vendor expressed worry. Each small lapse was a pinprick, but I also defended her publicly when needed, offering corrections and fixes with a helpful tone. I didn't humiliate her, I nudged things like a tide. Nora began to sense a pattern. She sought my advice more, and I fed her controlled fixes that left her leaning on my judgment. That made her dependent and allowed me to influence how she performed. Mr. Hale praised team resilience. I felt the net tightening. The company wanted a cheaper engine, and I was being kept around long enough to hand over the keys. My plan had to stay invisible to him while nudging Nora toward a specific kind of competence, efficient but shallow. Then a new twist arrived in the form of a complaint. One client wrote an email to the head office about a missed deadline. The email was polite but sharp, noting a lack of personalized follow-up. It landed on my desk like a splinter. I could have fixed it gently, but I let it become a visible thread that showed a pattern. Automated responses, no proactive touch. Nora burst into my office, frightened and apologetic. She hadn't known the client needed an extra confirmation call. I showed her the client's file, the part one had cleverly misfiled, and watched panic flash across her face. She blamed herself and begged for help. I taught her how to apologize and offer compensation. She did it. The client softened, but the damage was there. Mr. Hale contacted the client, promising a review of processes. He commended Nora for handling the apology, calling her resourceful. That phrase, praise for her resourcefulness despite the mistake, bothered me. It suggested Mr. Hale valued crisis managers more than long-term caregivers. I realized my work could be reframed as training someone to perform under fire, not to prevent the fires. The complaint created a smoky screen that hid the real pattern. My sabotage was working, but the narrative was shifting in ways I hadn't fully foreseen. I decided to use the narrative shift to my advantage. If Mr. Hale wanted resourceful crisis managers, I would make Nora appear to need that resourcefulness constantly. I started introducing controlled mishaps that required quick fixes. A misrouted invoice, a double-booked meeting, a lost invoice scanned to the wrong folder. Each problem looked like honest error to anyone glancing at the logs, but they always required the human touch I withheld from Nora. I coached her on reactive measures, calming language, fast refunds, quick apologies. She got better at on-the-spot damage control, and Mr. Hale praised her composure. The twist was that the more she excelled at firefighting, the more she seemed indispensable, exactly the opposite of what I wanted. It irritated and terrified me. I had wanted to expose a lack of foresight, not make her into a hero. I had to pivot. I began to secrete in her tasks responsibilities that only someone who knew the system intimately could anticipate. Vendor quirks, client personality files, unlisted shortcuts. I thought she'd fail when the pressure came. Instead, she grew adaptive, learning from each crisis. She stayed late, practiced, and her confidence rose. My plan began to wobble. The person I was undermining was becoming what a company values, resilient. That evening, I realized sabotage alone wasn't enough. I needed a twist that would show permanent weakness at the core. The next twist came from an old file, my vault of undocumented knowledge. It contained small methods that had kept the office running during past chaos. The way to sue the high-value client prone to panic, the vendor who gave discounts if called directly, passwords to an old scheduling tool. I decided to hide a crucial part of that vault where only I knew how to access it. Then I set a task that would require that knowledge, a coordinated launch that depended on sending a personalized memo to a select group of clients and vendors simultaneously. I assigned Nora the memo distribution and set the timeline tight. She would need to filter a list by an odd internal tag I'd used for years. I pretended to show her the list, but gave her a version missing the tag. I watched her work through it, polite and dutiful, and I imagined the confusion that would follow. Yet when launch morning came, something unexpected happened. A temp named Matteo, who sometimes filled in for us, noticed the inconsistency and mentioned it. He remembered that tag because he'd seen it in an old folder. He nudged Nora toward the correct file. The launch went off almost smoothly, though a few clients noted odd wording. I felt a cold rush, relief and irritation. My hidden vault had been partially discovered, and someone else had saved the day. The plot thickened. Allies and unpredictable helpers existed in this office ecosystem. Matteo became an unplanned variable. He was quiet, observant, and knew enough that no one assumed he remembered long-forgotten corner cases. But he did. After the launch, he approached me, eyes curious. "You keep things neat," he said. He had a knack for piecing together loose ends. I decided to recruit him without telling Nora. I started leaving breadcrumbs for him, notes only he seemed to notice. He responded by asking gentle questions that made me reveal small tips. He worked late, too, and together we began to patch the gaps Nora left. This created a strange triangle, me, Nora, and a helpful temp. I used Matteo to ensure nothing disastrous happened while my sabotage unfolded. That way, Mr. Hale would see a generally functioning office, with Nora looking stable enough to keep. It was perfect, except for a new twist. Matteo started to admire Nora's determination. He quietly told me he thought she was trying hard and learning fast. I felt the old pity again, a small ember that complicated my strategy. If Matteo pulled for Nora, he might bridge the gaps I was leaving. I had to ensure our plan's momentum without letting new sympathies undo the slow reveal I'd crafted. The next reveal came unexpectedly from Nora herself. One evening, she brought me a small paper bag with a pastry and sat down looking wrung out. "I want to be honest," she said. Her voice was soft. She admitted she'd been told by Mr. Hale that my position would be phased out, and she felt like a traitor for not telling me. She cried a little, not for herself but for how the team would change. Her sincerity surprised me. For a moment, revenge felt cruel. I told her, with an even tone, that the company changed and people adjusted. She hesitated, then said she wanted to do right by clients and wondered how to be better. I decided to offer her one real thing, a genuine technique I used to calm a client with anxiety, a direct phone script. "Say this," I told her, slowly and carefully. She practiced and thanked me. The twist cut both ways. I was giving her something useful that would make her better. But I kept back the rest, the vault, the vendor shortcuts. I was suddenly aware that my plan had moral edges I hadn't considered. I could ruin a person's career, or I could expose a system that pushed people like me out. That night I lay awake turning the choice like a coin in my hands. My need to be firm battled with a budding conscience that wanted to help Nora simply because she was trying. The game shifted when a rumor started spreading that a competitor was poaching our clients. The office buzzed with panic and whispered strategies. Mr. Hale called an emergency meeting and asked for ideas. He looked at me, expecting a calm expert. He looked at Nora, expecting someone new to contribute. I proposed a loyalty packet, personal outreach, small concessions, and a promise timeline. Nora volunteered to run the outreach and asked for my mentorship. I agreed, But this time I folded a gentle trap into the plan, a loyalty discount form that required a unique token from the vault to process discounts without approval. I hid the token and made sure the forms would halt if the token wasn't present. The thinking was simple. A missed discount process would show Nora couldn't access legacy tools. The outreach began. Clients responded with mixed feelings. Some loved the attention. Others requested the discount and hit a processing delay. The delay was blamed on system quirks. Mr. Hale demanded faster solutions. Nora stayed calm, apologizing, promising fixes. The twist was that the delays made Nora look sincere and hardworking. Clients appreciated her honesty, even as the system failed. I realized that failure paired with empathy became a new currency. If Nora could keep being present, she might win people over even if systems faltered. I needed a different angle. I started to leak to a coworker a rumor that our department might shift roles toward data-driven automation, downplaying the value of personal touches. The coworker, Simon, was an analyst who loved numbers. He ran a quick report showing productivity metrics and, to my dismay, found Nora's template-based efficiency impressive on paper. Mr. Hale waved the report like a flag at his next budget meeting. The numbers were neat. Tasks done faster, fewer logged exceptions. That should have been the end. Numbers trump feelings. But then another twist arrived. A longtime client emailed directly to complain about losing connection with the team. The email read, "We miss Dorcas' personal touch. This feels like a different company." The message went upstairs. Suddenly the narrative split. Spreadsheets said progress. Human notes said loss. Mr. Hale's face tightened. He asked for a reconciliation plan. I proposed a hybrid approach, automate routine tasks but assign a senior liaison for key accounts. That idea actually suited me. It gave me a role to safeguard clients for a while longer. The twist worked. I bought time while keeping Nora in the loop. But it also meant I would be seen as indispensable again, making my planned exit messier and more personal. With the liaison role approved, I had a dangerous advantage. I could control which clients required a senior touch. I reassigned the most delicate accounts to myself under the pretense of stability. Nora handled a wider net of smaller clients. That allowed me to show that certain relationships needed a seasoned hand. But a twist arrived in the form of a new client, a tech startup with a charismatic founder, Asha. She demanded innovation and bold moves. I took the account, and it consumed my attention. The startup's launch required personal coordination, midnight calls, and quick vendor favors. I used this as cover to hide my sabotage because I was too busy to micromanage Nora's tasks. While I worked with Asha, Nora made independent calls and gained confidence. In a week, she saw the vendor issue on her own, without using the vault. She'd watched me enough to improvise cleverly. The moment she told me, I felt a strange pride, then guilt. Asha's launch succeeded partially because I was good at intimacy with clients. But seeing Nora handle something herself and learn gave the story an unexpected twist. She was growing despite my interference. My plan was becoming a teacher's paradox. I had to decide whether to accelerate sabotage or pivot to exposing the system's injustice more broadly. The decision point came when HR announced a performance review cycle earlier than expected. My heart clenched. Reviews could seal my fate. I prepared evidence of stable client satisfaction, vendor relationships, and strategic projects like Asha's launch. Nora prepared too. She came to me for feedback on her self-evaluation and asked if I provide an ally note. I hesitated, then wrote a fair comment about her growth. I used some restraint and some truth. She had learned crisis management quickly, but still missed the unlisted keys to some systems. The twist was that my note might either protect her or highlight her weaknesses. I handed it to HR and watched the review meeting like a hawk. Mr. Hale presented recommendations. Nora for a full-time promotion, me for a transitional consultancy. The word stung. But HR asked for a final vote from the client liaisons. Asha called in. She publicly praised my dedication and suggested granting me a short-term consultancy to finish a project. That saved me for now. Yet the twist was clear. The company wanted to keep both of us in different boxes. I felt boxed. Winning short-term felt hollow. If they wanted to keep me as a consultant, it meant they'd removed authority, the part one cared about most. I realized then that the story wasn't only about revenge. It was about power and choice. I considered exposing Mr. Hale's plan to downsize through numbers and client testimonials. But fear of burning bridges stopped me. Instead, I moved to a subtler final act. I started compiling a timeline, documented examples of decisions that harmed client trust and the costs associated. I also began discreet conversations with a few clients, not to undermine Nora, but to gauge whether they valued personal continuity. Some clients, like Asha, wanted me involved. Others preferred Nora's promptness. The twist deepened. The company was splitting how it valued labor, experience versus speed. I decided to create a visible hinge moment, a project that would require both speed and deep client intimacy. If the company failed to support it properly, my documentation would show why. I pitched the project to Mr. Hale as a chance to unify the teams and asked for joint leadership with Nora. He agreed, perhaps to look collaborative. Nora and I were officially paired. I felt a strange solidarity, like being tethered to the person I'd been working to unseat. The final act was forming, and I had to be careful to keep the reveal clean and undeniable. The project began, a citywide campaign for a community client who needed both precise logistics and sensitive outreach to longtime supporters. The timeline was tight. I split tasks strategically. I took the supporters' outreach and the high-touch elements, and Nora handled logistics and automated updates. I intentionally set up a few choke points, places where obscure knowledge mattered, like a private donor list formatting and a vendor's informal discount agreement. I expected the gaps to show. Matteo continued to help behind the scenes, and his quiet competence comforted me. The twist here was that mid-project, a data breach hit the company. An old server that stored donor preferences spiked an error in scrambled tags. Panic spread. Nora on the front line looked stunned. Without proper tags, automated lists pushed wrong messages to donors. I sprang into action, calling donors, explaining the error, and personally restoring trust with a few key supporters. The breach exposed the fragility of the system we'd been teaching. The campaign survived, but only barely. Clients appreciated the humanity of our response. The twist, the breach made clear that the company valued human care over automation in crises. Mr. Hale, seeing our response, credited my stewardship. But the real question remained, would that change his cost-driven plans? After the breach, the company held a post-mortem meeting. Mr. Hale wanted to push more automation to prevent human error. I argued for robust human oversight. Nora supported me in the meeting. She'd seen how personal outreach saved relationships. Her voice surprised everyone. The twist blossomed. My sabotage had inadvertently taught her the value of care. We were aligned publicly now. Mr. Hale seemed taken aback. He proposed a compromise, keep some automation, but create a permanent senior liaison role to oversee client relations. I was offered the role, but with a catch, reduced authority and a shorter-term contract. Nora was offered a permanent junior manager role with training duties. The office cheered at the tidy solution. Inside, I felt a mix of vindication and bitterness. I had forced recognition of human work, but at my expense. The twist was bittersweet. I won principal but lost tenure. That night, Nora came by my desk with a hand-knitted scarf she'd made. "For you," she said. The gesture cracked something in me. I realized my revenge had turned into a lesson that didn't need to destroy someone else to be meaningful. The arc of my feelings shifted. Revenge softened into a hope for fair recognition, but the unfairness still stung. A new development complicated everything. Mr. Hale announced a strategic reorganization that would move the client services team under a different department, with a new director coming in from outside. The rumor mill swirled. The new director, Ms. Patel, would decide who stayed. My contract was temporary, which left me exposed. Nora felt anxious, and Matteo looked worried. I prepared a portfolio that showed the costs saved by human intervention, restored donors, repaired relationships, and averted vendor losses. I attached client testimonials. The twist was that my documentation was meticulous. It was undeniable. Ms. Patel arrived sharp and curious. In her first meeting, she asked blunt questions about past decisions. Mr. Hale found himself on the defensive for a change. Nora spoke up and recommended me for a senior advisory role. She said, honestly, that my knowledge rescued clients. That admission mattered. Ms. Patel read the portfolio and asked about long-term plans. She paused at Asha's letter, Asha pleaded for continuity. Ms. Patel then made an unexpected proposal. Keep both Dorcas and Nora, restructure roles meaningfully, and pilot a human-first approach for premium clients. The twist: my fate hinged on a stranger's risk appetite. I felt a cautious hope. The stakes shifted again, this time toward proving a new model that balanced heart and efficiency. Ms. Patel's pilot program started, and the office hummed with nervous energy. I was named senior advisor for premium clients, and Nora was junior manager for scale accounts. The new structure was promising. But then another twist: the board demanded quick cost savings and pushed back against pilot expenditures. They wanted numbers, not promises. I felt pressure to produce measurable outcomes fast. I and Nora had to show that human-centered care increased retention and contraction growth. We focused on Asha's startup and 2 other clients to produce clear metrics. Nora and I worked late, aligning communication and automations carefully. Matteo created dashboards showing retention rates by personal touch level. The first month, retention jumped slightly, then plateaued. The board's patience thinned. I felt the familiar ache of being close to success but not secure. One night, a client called frantic about a misprinted donor list, an old vendor error I'd warned about. The board saw it as proof that human oversight was still vulnerable. I took responsibility publicly and proposed a small budget to patch old systems. The twist: my candor earned admiration from Ms. Patel but also suspicion from the board. It felt like walking a tightrope where any gust could topple everything. Pressure mounted into a new twist when an anonymous internal memo accused the client services team of inefficiency. The memo circulated fast. Some board members used it to question Ms. Patel's pilot. The accusation hit like frost. Mr. Hale distanced himself, and whispers suggested the pilot might be cut. I suspected the memo came from someone threatened by change. I asked Matteo to trace its origin. He dug through timestamps and found an odd IP trace that pointed to an old desktop in a seldom-used office, an office Mr. Hale visited. The evidence wasn't definitive, but it suggested more than coincidence. Confrontation could be explosive. I chose another path: transparency. Nora and I compiled clean metrics, case studies, and a video of client testimonials detailing personal recoveries of trust. We put the raw data and the emotional stories side by side. At the board meeting, Ms. Patel presented both, and the contrast was stark. The twist: the board couldn't easily refute heartfelt client testimonials. They voted to continue the pilot, but demanded further accountability measures. The memo's origin remained murky, but its attempt to derail us backfired. In private, Mr. Hale's posture shifted. He was cooler now, more calculating. The atmosphere felt charged. I sensed an approaching final test, something that would determine the long-term shape of our roles. The final test arrived like thunder. A major donor threatened to pull funding if our campaign failed to deliver a promised community event. The donor wanted guarantees and a personal meet with someone senior. Ms. Patel asked me to lead the negotiation, with Nora supporting communications. The event was make or break for the pilot. I met the donor, an imposing woman named Evelyn, and listened to her concerns. She needed more than logistics. She wanted assurance the team respected community history. I promised a transparent plan and personal involvement. Nora managed the daily logistics brilliantly, and Matteo handled the technical backups. The twist came 2 days before the event. The venue canceled due to a double booking. Panic flared. We scrambled for alternatives. Nora suggested a smaller, more meaningful venue that required old vendor favors from my hidden vault. I revealed the vendor's secret and called in the favor. The venue saved the day. The event went beautifully. The donor stayed, the community applauded, and the board saw live evidence of our approach. The twist was that the crisis exposed every player's value: Nora's logistics, Matteo's tech, my relationships, and Ms. Patel's leadership. We proved the model. The board finally approved a permanent structure with enough budget to sustain it. After the event, things changed fast. The pilot got board approval, budgets increased, and the human-first approach became a model for other departments. Mr. Hale found himself sidelined but still on the payroll. Nora's promotion was formalized. Matteo received a full-time offer. I was offered a permanent senior director role with authority restored. The twist was a complex mix of relief and new responsibility. I accepted, but everything felt different. The months of strategy, sabotage, sympathy, and hard work led to a strange reconciliation. I thought often about the choices I'd made, teaching wrong, testing limits, protecting clients. I wondered if some of my actions had been unnecessarily cruel. Nora and I talked openly for the first time. She asked why I had taught her some things wrong. I told her a condensed truth. I was scared of being erased and wanted to push back. She listened without anger. She said she understood fear. The twist here was healing, a quiet, honest moment that rewrote both our stories. We agreed to collaborate differently, to keep the vault knowledge shared, and to build a training system that valued depth and speed equally. Months later, the office felt steadier. The human-first model scaled, with a training manual combining templates and the vault's subtle knowledge. I oversaw premium client strategy, Nora ran scaled operations, and Mateo led analytics. Mr. Hale took early retirement, his legacy a cautionary tale. The twist was that my revenge had become reform. What I began as sabotage turned into structural change. I sometimes still caught myself flinching at the sight of cheap efficiency, but those moments were softer now. Friends from other teams started asking me for advice. Asha's startup thrived and recommended our model publicly. Clients wrote thank you notes praising the Dorcas method. But life after victory brought new questions. Would we protect this balance when budgets tightened? Would new leaders respect what we built? Then a small, surprising twist occurred. Nora handed me a handwritten note with a single sentence. Thank you for teaching me to care. The note made my eyes sting. I folded it and kept it on my desk, a quiet reminder of how complicated justice can be. On a bright morning, 6 months after the pilot, I walked through the office and felt the calm hum of work that mattered. My role had depth again. My name was part of a model that valued people. Nora shot me a grin across the room, and Mateo waved from a screen filled with metrics. The company had changed, but more importantly, so had I. Revenge had been a ladder I climbed out of hurt, but at the top I found not empty victory but responsibility and a strange generosity. I still remember the moment Mr. Hale told me to train Nora, the sharp pain that sent me into plans and petty sabotage. Looking back, I saw each move as a stroke in a painting that turned dark into something new. The final twist was simple. The story that began as petty revenge became a blueprint for fairness. I kept the vault open now, and we trained every new hire properly. Nora became a friend and a partner. The scar of that morning stayed, but it didn't define me. Instead, it taught me that you can fight back without breaking someone, and sometimes the best revenge is building something that lasts. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and tap the bell to get notified the moment we drop a new story, and don't forget to like the video to help others find it.